Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this celebration of 250 years of the U.S. Army. And I'll introduce our team here in just a moment. I am Jim Hake, the founder and CEO at Spirit of America, and I'm very happy to see so many of our supporters on the call on this meeting today, including members of our board. Thank you all very much for being with us, for your support. For those of you who don't know about Spirit of America, we are a privately funded nonprofit, a 501c3 citizen service organization. And our team works alongside U.S. troops all over the world to provide private assistance in support of their missions, in support of their efforts to preserve the promise of a free and better life. And the promise of a free and better life is one of the things that the U.S. Army has helped attain and secure for 250 years. Right now, the Spirit of America team is especially active in Ukraine, Taiwan, Lebanon, and the Middle East. But today we're focused on the U.S. Army, and as I mentioned, honoring 250 years of the Army. Without the U.S. Army, led by George Washington, America would not have achieved its independence. And much like how the U.S. Army gave birth to the United States of America, the work and story of a U.S. Army soldier gave birth to Spirit of America a little over 20 years ago. I'm not going to tell that story today, but Michael, if you would please drop the link to my TED Talk into the chat, just for people who are interested in that story. But the U.S. Army, it's very fair to say, gave birth to Spirit of America, not only to our beloved country. So no America, or no Army, no America, no Army, no Spirit of America. So we have three very distinguished guests today. I'm going to introduce them, then we're going to jump into the fracas of our conversation about their service in the Army, about the future of the Army and what it's meant to them. So first we have Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. Ben is a class of 1980 at West Point. He rose to the rank of a 3-star Lieutenant General over his 37 years of Army service. That included service in, among other things, Iraq, among other places, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Korea, and Turkey. And he retired as the commanding general of U.S. Army Europe, where he had that role from 2014 to 2017. Ben is also a dear friend of Spirit of America, of mine personally, over the years, and a member of our board of advisors. Next, we have Brigadier General Kim Field. Kim is a West Point class of 1987 who served in the Army for 27 years, including service in Iraq, Somalia, and 3 tours in Afghanistan. She currently serves as the Director of Strategic Initiatives in the Office of the President at Texas A&M University. And next we have Ambassador and retired Army Colonel Roger Carstens. So Roger, West Point class of 1986, served for 24 years in the Army. He served in Army Special Forces. And after his service, and most recently from 2020 to 2025, he was a special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, where he attained the rank of ambassador. Roger is also a terrific member of our board of advisors as well. So thank you all for your connection to Spirit of America and for being with us today. It's a great honor for each and every, for me, for each and every one of the Spirit of America team, and for everyone that's on our call here. I'm going to ask a couple of questions to get started. For everyone who's with us, if you have any questions, please submit them via the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar, and I'll do our best to get to them. So Ben, being the longest tenured, let's say, member of
the oldest.
Yes, sure, that too. So if you could just say why did you join the Army in the first place, and then we'll start to take it from there. And Roger and Kim, feel free to jump in at any point in time. But Ben, just what got you into the Army in the first instance?
So, there was no burning bush moment in my youth, but I'm of a generation that in my family in North Florida, where I grew up, Tallahassee, The expectation was that all men would do something, that you would do your 2 years or whatever. Of course, there was still a draft as I was growing up. My father had been a private for a couple of years in the 50s, and pretty much every uncle and cousin had done their bit, but there was no career military except for one uncle who was a E9 in the Coast Guard. So it was a favorable profession. Something to do was expected, and I just was attracted to it. And of course, I was watching the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite every night, soldiers in Vietnam, and just watching our soldiers doing what they were doing. Of course, being too young to fully appreciate the terrible conditions they were in, I thought I want to be that. And so I said, I want to go in the Army. There was never a question. Um, I should say there was one moment where I briefly considered the Naval Academy because I had seen on the news these guys in these white uniforms and they were pilots, and I thought that looks cool. But then I saw the Naval Academy's catalog and I said, I will never make it there. And so I thought, no, I'm going into the Army. I'm going into the infantry. And if I'm going to be in the infantry, I want to be an infantry officer. And it was that simple.
And Kim, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say it was, I've always wanted to be in the army, but it's simply not true. My father, and sorry, there's something wrong with my camera. I'm just going to click off for a sec and click back in. My father who was really appalled that women were allowed into the service academies when it happened, and he has four daughters. He went to a conference at West Point, stayed at the Hotel Thayer, and across the field, the women's softball team was practicing. And he went and talked to them, and he came back and he said, "Honey, you got to apply to West Point. That is the most wonderful place, and it's the most wonderful place for women, and the country needs women in the military." Like, wow. Okay. So I decided that because my dad is my hero, and the least I could do for him was to apply to West Point. So I made it to West Point, where I made it my job to have as much fun as I possibly could, and which is hard to do at West Point, but I did it. And then I and then I joined, and then when I got actually out into the force, um, to get to be the principal trainer for 30 young, wonderful young Americans just lit me up. And I loved the Army as much as I didn't like West Point. So, and really, I guess the rest is history. Although, and I will say the point in telling that story is that I think people join the Army for many, many reasons, and I don't ever think we should question them. For me, it was love of father. If it's like love of not going to jail, that should be okay too, But it's yeah. Anyway, that's my story.
Cool. And Roger, how about you on that?
Okay, here we go. So when I was 11 years old, I would read these two newspapers in Spokane, Washington, and also read Newsweek and Time magazine. And I was following the genocide in Cambodia. At age 11, why? Who knows? But I was deeply bothered and impressed by like the horrific nature of what was happening over there. And I felt like I wanted to be in an organization that could perhaps stop something like a genocide or offer help to the civilians. And growing up on John Wayne movies and reading my history as I kept getting a little older about how the Army helped liberate Europe, how the Army helped liberate this country, that country, I came to the conclusion that the Army was the greatest, most well-funded, well-resourced human rights organization that ever existed. They don't just talk about human rights; they actually go out and liberate people willing to put their lives on their lines and walk their values. So I went to West Point, and like the general, I have to say, I had a brief moment where I thought about the Naval Academy. It was also the uniforms that got me, and I wasn't smart enough. No matter what I did, I could not get accepted to the Naval Academy because I just really did not have the intellectual capacity. But the Army embraced me. Went to West Point, also had fun. I was one of 13 members of my 1,000-person class that was a Century Man, which is serving punishment tours for doing all various acts of silliness. But I had fun at West Point, but I paid the prices on walking these punishment tours. But got into the Army, started off in the Ranger Battalion, also like the General, I went infantry. And then I went to Special Forces because the motto of Special Forces is de oppresso liber, to free the oppressed. And the Army, I felt, allowed me a chance throughout my entire 24 years of wearing a uniform to stay on that same line of continuity, to do things to help those who are most vulnerable out on this planet that we inhabit. And I was grateful for the Army for the values that it walks. I would say the ones that it taught me to be a little better on. And I appreciate every year that I served. I had a lot of fun, but also felt like I was very fulfilled.
And whoever wants to jump in on this one, I want to ask each one of you the same question. So whoever wants to go first is great. But is there one story, one experience, one moment that you can tell us about as to it really had an impact on you and that kept you, really captures the essence of what it meant to be a soldier in the U.S. Army, what kept you in for your many, many years of service? So Ben,
Okay.
we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Okay, the old guy will go first. You know, since I retired, people say, "Do you miss the Army?" And I say, "No, I did 37 plus years. But what I do miss, I miss the humor of soldiers. I mean, no group of Hollywood scriptwriters could come up with the stuff that a private or a lieutenant or some old sergeant will say. I mean, it's impossible. The humor, and I miss that. I mean, I think we're only going to go an hour tonight, so I'm not going to start telling funny stories. But I keep a list of these things, of that humor, and of course I miss having the knot in my stomach of being responsible for the mission. Um, and then, of course, when I'm standing in security at the Frankfurt airport, I really miss having my own airplane. But that's a different that's a different thing. But I had a first sergeant, Pedro Ramon Rosado Velasquez. After 20 years in the Army, he still sounded like he had just arrived. Best soldier I ever met in my life, a Vietnam veteran. He was incredible. And I remember I was a company commander at the 101st, and I was giving a briefing to my lieutenants of this great training thing we were going to do. It was in the first month of command. I mean, these were pearls. I was giving these guys genius pearls of what we were going to do. And they were, "You have any questions?" "No, sir." Air assault. And they left. And then I noticed that Pedro kind of hung back a little bit. I said, "First Sergeant, what's wrong?" And he very quietly shut my door and he said, "Sir, I tell you this, if we do your plan, we are up." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yes." And then he gave the 5 fatal flaws of my plan. I'm like, "Oh my God, get those stupid lieutenants back in here now." And of course, what I learned is that he was such a professional soldier that if I had said, "Thanks, we're still going to do it," he would have carried it out. But he also knew that it was his duty to save me from myself. And he did it in such a way that I immediately, and of course, I learned, don't plan anything without getting your team, especially the NCOs, involved from the beginning. And so I love Pedro to this day. We stay in touch. But that captures for me what my Army experience really was about.
Uh, Roger, how about you? Then Kim, I'm going to ask you the same question.
Yeah, it might be unusual. You might think I'd go back to where the parachute assault into Panama during the liberation. That kind of check the block on the freeing people type thing that I loved about the Army. But I'm going to tell a story that's very brief about something that meant a lot to me. And it was we were in a place called Waldfleck in Germany, doing some training, and it just typical German day. 38 degrees, pouring rain, everyone's soaked, everyone's miserable, and we were doing close quarters combat in a shooting house, and we do it all day long. And it's that they shut down the range at like 11 at night. It's probably like 10:15. We do the last hit. Everyone's exactly totally exhausted, and we get out into a little huddle, about 34 of us on these two combined special forces teams, and the senior NCO says, "Hey guys, I think we've done a great amount of work today. We have 45 minutes, but I think we hit the objectives." Did everyone feel comfortable with that last iteration of close quarters combat in this building? And the guy who just joined the team, and he's 6, raises his hand and goes, "I didn't feel comfortable." And he goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Well, this, that, and the other, that, and the other." He goes, "Okay, that's legit. Let's do it again." And so even though everyone was dying to get to sleep and get warm because we had to start the day at 4 a.m. the next morning, instead, everyone, like with optimism, set up all the targets and hit the objective again. Now it's 11 o'clock at night. The Germans have shut down the range. We get out there and he goes, "How about that time, Randy? Did you feel better about the iteration?" He goes, "I do. Thanks a lot." Where else would that happen? In most organizations, they would have mocked that guy, said, "You're new, shut up. Why don't you just pay attention, or we'll get this tomorrow." And instead, we stayed out there in the cold and rain to make sure that one guy out of 34 felt like he achieved his objective that night. And I thought, boy, I'm in the right place at the right time with the right people on this. We went to bed, we cleaned up the range, got to bed probably about 12:30 or 1, got up 3 hours later and went out and trained. But I'll always remain grateful for that senior sergeant who heard a junior sergeant say he wasn't completely happy. And then we went out and did it again.
Great story. Kim?
Yeah, so it's sort of another like a kind of an old person story. It was Somalia of all things back in 1992. Um, and I was a military police company commander, and I had chosen MP because it was really the closest women could get to the combat arms at that time. And I really loved that career field. So it was at Thanksgiving when George H.W. Bush said, you know, with the picture, and I think everybody, no matter what your age, probably knows this picture of the small child with the distended stomach and the vulture, you know, looking at it. And he said, you know, this is at the end of the Cold War. We have this kind of peace dividend thing. He didn't say that. And we're going to go do something about it. And I was so pleased and proud to be part of that, which also gave me my love for kind of, as Roger is saying, is this idea that you know we can help people who need help. I mean, sometimes it doesn't always make sense, but in this, so we deploy my company, and we're there, we're escorting humanitarian relief supplies into the interior, and then all of a sudden, which went fairly smoothly, we didn't see a lot at first, and then we were asked to set up a screen between Adid, the warlord, and the interim president Mohammed. And we have 20 fighting positions, and all of a sudden we hear this crowd with sort of still distant gunshots. We couldn't see it coming closer. And I'm moving from position to position, checking on everybody, and I have one of my team sergeants come running at me. Like, ma'am, I don't know what we're doing here. This is not what you said. And it just really, I mean, we didn't have a big conversation then. You know, I basically talked to him about, you know, his soldiers needed him. He's a great soldier. But it really stuck with me, this idea of they want to know why, they want to understand the mission at every level. And I needed to know why better. And I needed to understand better that we could be asked to do anything as the Army, and it could change on a dime. And it just really stuck with me, this thoughtfulness about our profession, and what we ask soldiers to do. So, I mean, that was really, it just stuck with me. And I absolutely loved this part of the Army's history. And it did start in Somalia. But I just to tell one more super quickly. I remember in Afghanistan, I was General Routes XO. And this sticks with me too, because I was thinking about this and I thought, geez. And we needed him. But General Petraeus had called, and he was in his hooch, and he was in his hooch. We went and got him in the aid. And we when we entered, he was kneeling at the foot of his bed, writing condolence letters. And if that didn't really, he wasn't sitting at his desk. He went to a private place. He knelt in his really posture of really of prayer, and was really taking, you know, he's putting his whole heart into these condolence letters in a way that just hit me like, holy cow. So anyway, those are two things that just really stand out to me. Sorry, thanks. I took two. You don't have to ask me the next question, Jim.
No, thank you. Ben, I'm going to go back to you with reflections on how the Army, how you've seen the Army change. You know, not even when you were serving, but even your memory of it before, perhaps. But at least, you know, how you've seen it change. Before you answer that, and while the others are talking, if you have that list of sayings handy that you referenced, I want to come back to that later if you remember a few, because I think everybody on this call, on this meeting, would love to hear a few of those colorful sayings, because we might be able to use them in our own lives. Put a pin in that one. But how how do you see how the Army has changed over the years, and compared to when you joined, and what we have today?
Well, the obvious changes, of course, deal with the modernization of equipment, those kinds of things, and perhaps the from a cultural standpoint, I'm very proud that my class of 1980, was first to have women. These young women started in 1976, and of course, it was hell for each of them. Um, and still, a little over 50% graduated and went out into an army that was not ready for them. Even though West Point was not really ready, it got ready. The Army was not ready, but it got ready. And seeing how we have transitioned now where we have retired female four-stars, we've had chief of service, we've had combatant commanders as women. So that's not inconsequential. We are so far ahead of every other army in the world when it comes to women in terms of having responsibilities, although there are others like, the Israeli army and some of the Scandinavian armies have women everywhere, but not at the top ranks. So I'm proud that we have done that and that we are better for it. But I would also say, in parallel, that what has remained constant and why the Army does keep rolling along is um, it is the ultimate merit-based profession. That doesn't mean that everybody that ever got promoted was the best person that could have been promoted. But the fact is, when you're in combat, you don't care what color somebody's hair is or what color their skin is or what their religion is. You want to know that they can perform their tasks. And that's been a consistent since 1775. And the best units were always the ones that focused on readiness, on training, whether it was if you were in a 113 or a Bradley or a Stryker or an Abrams or an Apache, it didn't matter. Focused on training and readiness. And, you know, soldiers get their confidence if they are physically fit, they're good with their weapon, and they trust each other. Then there's nobody that can stop you. So that's been a constant. At the same time that our technology changed and that our society changed around us, and I think we changed with it.
And Kim, on Ben's point about how ready or not the Army was for having women join the ranks, what's your view on that?
I was a seventh class to graduate from West Point. Um, and this is going to sound odd maybe, but I never had a real sense that I wasn't supposed to be there or that it was, frankly, that it was hard or harder than for me than for anyone else. I mean, if I could take a step back, I'd say, okay, my barriers to entry were higher, but once I jumped those barriers, I felt like the rewards were great. People were looking, really, I think, to really say, this part of our population has a lot to give. So I think maybe those first 5 or so years are probably really tough, but I just didn't see it. In fact, when I went back to teach at West Point 10 years later, I thought, it's the same sort of issues. It's like women not feeling like women at West Point, not feeling very feminine. It's the same, not being able to be in the combat arms, made you slightly a second-class citizen. But none of that was about a person-to-person, ill intent or anything like that. I always just gave all my male colleagues the same benefit of the doubt they gave me, and I don't have a great dramatic story to tell. Yeah, you have your isolated incidents of being harassed or even assaulted, but I think that honestly, not acceptable ever, not one. But I think it happens everywhere, and I think the Army, as General Hodges said, has really led the way for our society.
Thanks. And anything you want to reflect on about how the Army's changed from, when you joined and where you see it now?
Yeah, yeah, maybe. This idea of, and this is not in, Title 10 code to say that Army exists to fight and win our nation's wars. There is language similar. But to fight and win our nation's wars and defining wars and fight and win, what that meant has been a constant sort of analytical almost endeavor in my entire career, from the end of the Cold War to the peace operations decade to the era of counterterrorism, and now we're back in this era of peer competitor and strategic competition, if you will. And what does that mean for the Army? Right. So if we look at, so I always think, let's go back to first principles. Let's go back to the foundation of things. And in Title 10, it says the Army is going to do whatever the nation needs. It's very clear, but shall be organized, trained, and equipped to prosecute wars on the land, right? For basically ready, prompt, sustained combat. This is a really tricky thing for the Army, and I really don't see it changing. I do think the emphasis on lethality is very important. We have some ground to make up. Having said that, I think we'd better be seeding the capabilities we need across that full range that we've always been asked to do. So thanks, Jim.
Roger, over to you. Your reflections on the Army from when you joined or when you first started really paying attention as a boy to present day. You're on mute, Roger.
That shows you my age. If you're over 60, that happens probably at least one Zoom call. So I
It
think
wouldn't
the
be a Zoom call if something's like that.
I'm that guy. So, well, it's actually one of the points I was going to bring up. So, women being integrated into the combat arms to include special operations. I mean, that's obviously to me a bonus, because people bring different things to every fight. And I think having that ability to tap into that group, I think is a positive thing. Technology, which I failed there. The folks out there now, you throw a drone at a infantry squad or an infantry platoon, and it's not a big thing. They just go right to work. I'm putting a drone in the air, but they're also geopolitically aware, much more so than I think when I was a second lieutenant. When I ended as lieutenant colonel, you have people that are reading, privates are reading The Economist, corporals are talking about some of the deepest things about, geopolitical machinations. But Jim, it's the stuff that remains the same is what I find interesting. There are things that have changed, but the things that don't change are to me like right there in your face. It's the adherence to duty, honor, country, the adherence to the values that the Army embraces, the adherence to the Constitution, taking an oath to the Constitution, not political leaders, and the importance of that to soldiers, and just the importance on people and not weapons. As the general pointed out, the weapons that we're getting and the capabilities are just mind blowing right now. We're going to get to an age where it is like that Heinlein novel, Starship Trooper, where we're probably wearing exoskeletal suits that can just do amazing things on the battlefield. But it's the people that are fascinating. A lieutenant colonel once told me this. I was a major back at Fort Bragg, and he goes, "How do you train people to fight the next war when you're not even sure what the next war looks like?" And I thought that was an interesting question. As he kind of rope-a-doped me on my answer, he kind of gave me the answer. And it's like you select good people and you try to instill with them the ability to uh, take the commander's intent, to make decisions out there in the far reaches that are their own, and get good people with good values. And I think we get that. Brief story. So we're at the Q course, and I was running the Special Forces qualification course, a chunk of it. And there was this one soldier that everyone was trying, all the cadre were trying to run out. He had tattoos all over the place, would listen to the craziest music, would wear his jeans halfway down his rear end, when he was on his free time. And so they put a target on this guy's back and wanted to run him out of special forces training. And I called the cadre and I said, "Stop, let him succeed. If he succeeds, if he passes, then he passes, but do not go the extra effort to run anyone out." And everyone grumbled, but sure enough, the guy graduates from the Special Forces qualification course. And again, this guy's like a hipster saint, tattooed, crazy music, the whole bit. Guess who wins the Silver Star for the soldiery in Afghanistan 6 months later? This guy. The guy that they wanted to run out gets one of our nation's highest medals for heroism on the battlefield. And that just shows you that America's always going to produce the really good soldiers, good people, and the Army has a good way of bringing them in. And I love that old special forces or special operations saying humans are more important than hardware. And I think that's one thing that the Army always gets right.
That's great. Ben, how are you doing on the list of sayings over there? I am not. I'm not. We're not going to ask for them yet. That's going to be our close to the day, I think. But just checking.
What I was saying was that I had a list of funny stories that I have been accumulating over the years, not necessarily witticisms that would be unique that Kim and Roger don't already know. But I do remember hearing my father and my high school football coach say, "It never rains in the Army, it just rains on the Army." So, in other words, quit whining about the conditions. Of course it rains on the Army, but it's not raining in the Army. So you inure yourself to, you're expected to be able to accomplish your task no matter what the weather is. And that was a simple thing that I have carried with me ever since. And of course, I served in the great 101st Airborne Division 4 times, and we loved saying that if you want it done, we used it from Vietnam. If you want it done, you give it to the 101. And not nearly as flashy as our brothers and sisters in the 82nd Airborne Division or in Rogers' beloved Rangers and Special Forces, the 101st was always
Mhm.
kind of like the offensive line. And I really, I
Yeah.
like, if you want it done, give it to the 101. And then I had a sergeant major. And by the way, that's whatever your business is, whatever your profession is, you want everybody to look at your organization as they'll get it done. They're reliable. They may not be the flashiest or the whatever, but you can always count on them. And that, I think all professional soldiers always wanted to have that reputation of no matter what, we will get it done. And that's part of our ethos in the Army. I mean, George Washington, when he crossed the Delaware, he was definitely not C1 on manning, training, or equipment, but yet, they were expected to succeed, and they did. But I had this sergeant major tell me one time. He said, "Sir, everything good in the Army begins with accountability." And of course, what he was talking about is not just knowing where all your people are, but it's accountability of everything about your people, your equipment. That's really hard to do. I mean, whether you've got 10 soldiers in a squad or 120 soldiers in a company or whatever your organization is, it's hard to know everything about everybody and to their status. And so if you've got that licked, you're probably on the way to doing good things. And that was something that I tried to imbue in every organization I was. The last thing, and this is a very short story, we were in Iraq outside of Mosul, and I was out visiting Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, 327 Infantry. This is like about 6 months into the war, and I was the 101st Airborne Division, and the division commander was General Petraeus at the time, and they had been working very hard to get us replacement boots and T-shirts and socks and new tires for the Humvees. I mean, this was 6 months into the war, and the 101st was in the very northern part of Iraq, so literally at the end of the logistics tail. And people were wearing clothes that not only did they stink, but their T-shirts were rotting off their back, and it was that kind of stuff. And so the assistant division commander in particular had the task to fix that. And so I'm out visiting Charlie Company there, and I see this private and his boots. I mean, they are held together with masking 100-mile-an-hour tape, and they're sweaty and grimy. And but this kid looked like he was 14 years old. He was a relatively new private, and just so happens while I'm there, the doggone assistant division commander shows up, and of course he immediately spots this kid with these boots, and he goes, "What the hell is going on here? Don't you have other boots? Didn't you get the new boots that we've been working like dogs to get everybody?" And this kid go, "Yes, sir." And then the Brigadier General, it'll come back to me, says he looks at me and he looks at the company commander and the whole chain. He means like, "You guys are not taking care of the troops. What's going on here?" Blah blah blah. And yes, sir, we screwed up. And so then the DCG leaves, and then we all turn on this private. "Don't you have the other boots?" And he goes, "Yes, sir, and I do have them." He said, "Where are they?" "They're right." He said, he points. He said, "They're right here by my rucksack." Like, "Why aren't you wearing them?" And then I saw into the soul of a soldier. He says, "I didn't want to look like one of these new recruits." This kid was so young, and we had just started getting replacements. And he was so proud that he had been a part of 2nd Battalion, 327 Infantry, and the 101st in the invasion of Iraq. He was so proud of that, that the only thing that separated him from looking like a brand new private was these boots that had walked across Kuwait and Iraq. And I mean, I get, it really was a story that will stick with me forever. And so, of course, then I called up the general later, "Sir, we've solved the boot problem." And of course, he loved it. He said, "That's the kind of people that we want." So those are the kind of things that have made it worthwhile for me, despite all the stuff about being in the Army.
Hey, I
Yeah,
was crying during that story. I don't know about you guys. I teared up.
yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. So Roger, question I'll ask each of you, or at least a couple of you. Start with you, Roger. Is there
Yeah.
a time in your service when civilian support for the Army had a major impact on you or your fellow soldiers?
Wow. So, if I were to think about that, there were times I think during Iraq and Afghanistan and even Somalia where things would show up. Um, but I would say overall, my Army experience is characterized by a lack of that. There weren't things coming out from civilians in the United States or anywhere else. And I think that's why I was so taken by Spirit of America, and that instead of having to wait for, say, a high school in why not North Dakota to send something, some books, or to maybe wait for Congress to allow us the authorities and the appropriations to give us money so people can spend money on bringing soccer balls over and things like that. Spirit of America identified it under your leadership, Jim. Spirit of America identified this gap or this seam in our ability to connect with people, to find stuff that we need, whether they're medical kits, whether they're things that allow us to connect with the civilian populace. And I think you've done it. That's why I am so proud to be on this call today and to be a part of the advisory board, because you've not only found this gap and you've filled it, but you've really mechanized it in a way that it can be counted on, to where you can go out and talk to an ambassador or a commander in the field and ask, what is it do you need? What do you need that you can't get anywhere else? And Spirit of America can find a way to fulfill it. So overall, it's a great question, but for most of my Army career, when I was out in the field, there was nothing. And now, due to Spirit of America, there is something, and there's a path, a mechanized, repeatable, cookie cutter path to get help through this organization that we're all part of.
Well, thank you, Roger. And last week we had our annual team week. I'll just tell a brief story that plays off that a bit. We had our annual team week. Everybody, all 45 of us now, here in our nation's capital. Once a year we get everybody together. And we had one of our supporters, and this is on the record, so I can mention it. Ross Perot Jr. came and talked to the team for about an hour. And one of the things that Ross has said about Spirit American, you just nailed it, Roger. He said that we took what his father, as a motivated, patriotic individual American, would do when he could to help help the troops, help their missions. That we have taken that and we've operationalized it and institutionalized it to be able to provide that kind of outlet for the kind of citizen service that Kim is working on, encouraging more of it at Texas A&M. So thank you for bringing that up. Kim or Ben, do you want to take a crack at that one yourselves? Kim, you're on mute.
Thank you. Um, pile on a little bit what Roger said. I do think so with a slightly different angle. I do think that the American people have given the military everything we've asked for, largely in general. I'm talking about the American population over the last, now 30 years, 25 years. In fact, sometimes I think they give too much. Without enough, just real engagement. So when Spirit of America came and Jim, I think we've been talking now for what, 15 years when you were scaling. And it was just an amazing thing. And, we often talk about this gap, civ-mil gap. I'm not sure we always talk about it. It doesn't typically change that much, I don't think, although now we may be at some risk. The but this idea that we have gotten everything we wanted, but yet there's still been this kind of disconnect. We are still isolated on our bases. We're still, the American people don't really know exactly what this thing is all about. 1% serves. I am not a fan at all of senior leaders saying that 80% of America is not qualified to serve in the Army or the Marine Corps or whatever it is. I think that's a terrible message, to be honest. Because it is America's Army, and we ought to represent America, and we ought to be part of it. So your organization, Jim, really does a lot to just say, hey, connect. Connect for you, our national security, the people who are executing it, the people, the ambassadors, the State Department, our soldiers. So anyway, a little bit more than you asked for, maybe.
No, thank you. And Ben, anything from you? then I'll ask a closing question to everybody.
Yeah, well, of course, I met you through your guys who were supporting us in Europe, doing the task, whether it was providing gravel for a construction project or radios for Ukrainian radio station or first aid kits for Georgian border guards. I mean, so I saw what you were doing, but the answer I would want to offer is something that I got from our allies. I spent my last 5 years in the Army in allied organizations as NATO Land Command and then U.S. Army Europe. And our allies were always so impressed with how Americans would say, thank you for your service. Walking through an airport or wherever it was, that it really, because that is unique to us. And a lot of my friends that were Brits or Germans or Poles or whatever, they would laugh about being in Washington for a business in their uniform, and people were coming up saying, "Hey, thank you for your service." And they're like, actually, I'm a British soldier, or I'm Polish," and they say, "No, man, thanks for your service." And that kind of staying connected. And I think I'm not speaking for Kim, but I think what I'm hearing her say, I agree with it, is that we don't want to lose that. That America's Army, our military, it is a volunteer force, and we depend on the willingness of Americans to send their sons and daughters to serve, to pay taxes, enable us to do what we do. And so we don't want to fail that trust. And that's why we value our oath to the Constitution so much, that it's the American people never have to worry, what's the Army going to do, if they're not happy with whatever.
Yep. So my last question for each of you, last couple of minutes here, is what do you hope for in the future of the Army? And that can be the Army's role in America, the Army's role in the world, the character and nature of the Army. What do you hope for? So Roger, let's start with you, then Kim, then Ben. We're going to ask you to wrap it up on a closing note with that, please.
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. That the Army adheres to the values that it's kept for so many years, that it maintains its oath to the Constitution, as the general just brought up. And I'll be a happy camper. Warfare is going to change. People will change in some way, shape, or form, society, culture. But as long as the Army stays a service of values, and as long as the Army in its base function stays loyal to the U.S. Constitution, I think we're going to be fine. Those are the things I would hope for.
Kim, over to
Yeah, I
you.
don't have that much more to add to that. Honestly, I'd say that we stay willing to do whatever the country asks of us on a foundation of our profession. And our profession, this idea of a professional ethos, policing, an expert body of knowledge based on character and values. I think that and we always invest in people. We know that the strength of the Army is people. So, and people seeked in that ethos, our profession will be all right. Better than all right. Thanks, Jim.
Great, thank you. And Ben, to you, please.
So I have carried this copy of the Constitution with me for the last
Awesome.
26 years. I mean, you can see it's pretty dog-eared. I've used it many different times for different reasons, but I carried it because I learned when I was working in Army Congressional Liaison, I was frustrated with some congressional staffers that were digging into how the Army was doing certain things. I was like, "Why do you care?" He said, "Colonel, did you take an oath to the Constitution?" I said, "You bet I did, many times." He goes, "Well, maybe you should read it." And he highlighted Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, where it lays out the role, responsibilities of the Congress with regards to the armed forces. And in fact, it even says to provide and maintain a Navy, to raise and support armies. It doesn't say anything about the Air Force, by the way. I'm just saying they're not in the Constitution. But and so I kept this with me. And there's a reason that we affirm the oath every time a soldier reenlists or there's a promotion, over and over and over and over and over, so that it's in the fiber of who we are, so that men and women will have the courage to refuse an unlawful order, and to do what is always right, and for officers and to protect their soldiers from bad policy or unlawful orders. But but that's what I think gives American people confidence that we will always, the people that have all the guns, that have been entrusted by the state with the authority to use lethal force, that we will always do it in accordance with the law and for our Constitution. That's easy to say. It's not always easy to do, as we have seen. But for me, there's a reason we take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And that's unique to America's armed forces. And that's why I keep it with me.
General Hodges, you hold that up for me 1 second, will you please? It's good for my program. Thank you.
That is awesome. Thank you, Ben. And just a closing thought. There's occasionally the debate about whether America is exceptional or not. And, my view is that what we stand for is 100% exceptional. We have to earn exceptional every day. We've got to do that every day. That's how that's when we are exceptional. And I want to thank each of the three of you for your exceptional service of being exceptional Americans, and you earn it every day in the work that you continue to do. I'm proud to have you as part of the Spirit of America team. Proud to know you, and thank you so much for being with us today.
What a privilege to be with a group of great Americans.
And Jim, thanks for your leadership and pulling this all together. Grateful.
Thank you, Roger. Kim, thank you. You're gone.
Thank you, awesome, Jim.
Thank you all for everybody who's joined us. Michael, if you could just drop our social links in the chat. So we're gonna be posting some highlights, and it's gonna be really hard to choose. It's up to better minds than mine, happily. But we're going to be posting those on our social media. So everybody was with us today. If you can take a look at those, share those, help spread the words that these three incredible Americans have shared with us all today. I'd appreciate that. Anyway, thank the three of you. Have a great rest of the day, and go Army. And I say that as a son of a Navy veteran. So there you have it.
Go Army.